In this one, folks, we're going to talk about Aquarius, Pisces, and that will end our ecliptic constellations, and then we will begin talking about some circumpolar constellations, and in this video we'll talk about Cassiopeia and Cepheus. So let's begin with Aquarius. Aquarius in ancient mythology is the water bearer. So we're talking about another one of the ecliptic constellations. This interesting ecliptic constellation is associated with a time of flooding and heavy rains in the Middle East, because that's where a lot of this mythology began, and people were identifying these constellations, these ancient constellations. In the sky, you can find Aquarius next to other water constellations like Pisces the fish, Capricorn, which is that goat fish, and Cetus, which happens to be a whale or a sea monster, depending upon your interpretation. Now, how do you get a water bearer out of this picture up here? And that's why I included this illustration. This large segment, and I'm actually going to turn to blue for giggles, this large segment of the constellation is supposed to represent the water Aquarius is pouring out. This small section up here is supposed to represent his vessel or jug that is using to pour that water. And the Aquarius constellation became visible about the time of the ancient floods, and so did all of these water constellations. So these ancient peoples made sense out of them compared to what they were experiencing. This long skinny bit of the constellation actually represents Aquarius's hand and leading over to the jug and the water. So the most important fractions or portions of this picture are the jug and the water, and then his hand leading away. You don't see very much of the rest of the constellation as far as making sense out of it and seeing an image in it. But that is Aquarius. The next one is Pisces. Pisces, to me, is much easier to see in the sky. Pisces means the fish, and this fish constellation is, the story behind it is that Aphrodite, which was the goddess of love, and Eros, who was Cupid in the other country, I can never remember who's Latin and who's Greek, but Eros or Cupid, who was her son, they were hiding in the sea from a demon that was trying to get them, and they turned themselves into fish. And mother and son did not want to be separated from each other, and they didn't want to get lost from each other, so they had a line connecting them together. So this big V, I always find Pisces pretty easy to see because it's this big V, which is the fishing line with a fish on one end and another fish on the other end. It is located next to other water constellations, Aquarius and Cetus the whale. Next one up, now that will end our ecliptic constellations. We're going to start talking about some of the circumpolars. And the circumpolars, I think, are very important for you and I, living as far north as we do, because we can see these every night of the year. One of my favorite ones to identify in the sky is Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia, or Cassiopeia, depending upon how you say it, in the sky looks like a large W. And that large W in the sky is supposed to represent the Queen of Ethiopia seated on her throne. Now, Cassiopeia was a very vain woman, and she actually bragged that she was more beautiful than Poseidon's daughters. Now, Poseidon was god of the sea. Well, the gods didn't like things like that, and so Poseidon let loose a sea monster on the country of Ethiopia. The father of Andromeda, who was a princess of Ethiopia, went to see an oracle, and the oracle said, and he asked the oracle, how can I save my country? And the oracle said, you must sacrifice your daughter to the sea monster Cetus. Well, they tied Andromeda to a rock. They chained this maiden to a rock, and she was there for a long time, waiting to be devoured by the monster until the hero Perseus came along and saved her. Many portions of this story are immortalized in many constellations, and the first of which is Cassiopeia. So here's Cassiopeia with that very distinctive W circumpolar constellation representing this vain queen sitting on her queenly throne. The next one is Cepheus. Now, Cepheus is the king of Ethiopia, also circumpolar. He's the husband of Cassiopeia. He's the father of Andromeda, and he's the one who went and asked, "How do I save my country?" and was told he had to sacrifice his daughter. The constellation Cepheus, when I see it, I see this. I see a dunce hat sitting on top of a square. Now, that's how Cepheus looks to me, but other people see it with the dunce hat and the square, and then some little arms down below. If you look at actual pictures when they're trying to make sense out of how does that look like a king, remember, constellations don't have to look like anything. Sometimes they just represent something. And so it's, yeah, that's the weird and crazy constellation Cepheus. But the nice thing about learning some of these stories is the constellations are near each other in the sky. So Cepheus is right next to, look who's right here, his wife, Cassiopeia. That will do for this time. We'll see you again.